So again, my name is Craig Van Corlar. I did found Top Nonprofits back in 2011. I have spent time in all of the sectors, though. So time in the nonprofit sector, business sector, government sectors. My education background, my undergraduate is in nonprofit leadership and management, and more recently, at a master's level, innovation and entrepreneurship. Some interesting facts. I'm a dad of 2 girls. I'm living the pink life, 4 and 1. I have lived on 3 continents, spent time in over 20 countries, and a random fact, I compete in fly fishing competitions, more as a way to learn from those that are better than me than truly being all that great myself. So I love nonprofits. I love all things kind of strategic planning. I specialize in areas of service design, process improvement, user advocacy, website and application planning. And I've done a lot of stuff around mission statements over the years. We created some resources back in the day that have become very popular and have given me a lot of opportunities to interact with organizations and not just nonprofits, right? We have a significant audience around this topic that span business, government, and all of that. So again, really excited to have you guys here. We'll dive into the content here in a second, but I'm going to pass things back to Amy. We're going to run through a couple polls that you guys can kind of fill out live. We'll review those results here in a second, and what that will help me do is understand who's on with us right now so that I can kind of custom tailor the content as we go through it. So just take a second, go ahead and answer this first question that talks about organization size. That has implications around number of people involved and the complexities and all that around facilitation. So.
Perfect. And yes, thanks, Craig. And again, as Craig mentioned, we have 3 questions that are coming up in succession here. So if you could take a look and answer, the first question is, how large is your organization? And so if you could indicate the one that's most appropriate to your organization, whether it is a nonprofit or it's a business or a government or an educational entity, please select the appropriate size there. That would be great. It's helping us to sort of, as Craig mentioned, he'll know how to tailor the presentation today. The next question, so hopefully I've given everybody enough time to answer that first question. Second question, how many people are involved with creating your mission statement? So think about this for a second. Who is tasked with it? Does it involve a board? Is it purely you? Is there somebody else? Is it a large group? So I'm going to give you a few more seconds. We'll have to answer that question. Okay, and finally, the next question is a multiple choice. So what are the biggest challenges you've had with regard to crafting a vision and a mission and a vision statement? So you can select as many of those as apply. And so the first is confused on the definitions, mission versus vision versus purpose versus values. Certainly that is a lot to take in, and if that's where you are, definitely click that, and Craig can speak to it. Facilitating and getting people to agree, I can't imagine where that's never a problem, but I imagine that's always going to be a challenge. So feel free to indicate that as well. Lack of framework or clear process, which I think is you're going to have some tools in today's, Craig will go over some tools that you'll be able to take and utilize right away. And to help you with that, and then wordsmithing, we have a tool for that as well. And convincing others that a change is needed. I think this overall session is going to be helpful in being able to do that. So please click the answers and click the submit button, and then hopefully we should be getting the results. Okay. All right, so Craig, you can see here. Thanks everybody, thanks for participating. It did work, I was holding my breath there. So Craig, you can advance the slides to see what the percentages of the audience are indicating or identifying as.
Perfect.
I'll mute myself.
Perfect.
Thanks.
All right. So it looks like the bulk of folks are coming from smaller end organizations, that we do have some representation on the large organization side as well as the mid. So we'll touch on all of those, but that's definitely helpful. Those involved in creating the mission statement. So if it's just you, that's great. In some senses, it's the easiest, though I prefer that plus one other person whenever possible, just to kind of use that brainstorming. So looks like we have a little bit of representation there. And then we've got the bulk of folks where it's a team that's working on it, right? And there's a lot of advantages to a team, and there's a lot of very unique challenges to a team. So this is good. We're going to spend a little bit more time towards the end talking about what it looks like to manage these groups. What are some things to kind of keep in mind that will help you avoid some of the common pitfalls and pains? And I might even follow up after the presentation with some additional stuff, since that's so heavy in terms of the audience. So good stuff there. And then we're going to be covering the definitions and the differences. So great. Facilitation and getting people to agree. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Facilitation's an art form. Again, there are some tips that we can provide. We will touch on it a little bit here, but again, that's where I'm kind of thinking I'm going to follow up with some additional tips and guidance for you. A big part of what we're doing today is going to be looking at that framework. So we're good there. And then we'll be giving you some tips around wordsmithing. That is a consistent challenge, irregardless of the size of the organization and people involved and all of that. And again, it's going to be unique to what you're doing. So we're going to give you tools that will help you focus on the right elements and will help you distill those down. But you know, that will be one of those areas that you'll need to be prepared to spend some time and to go through multiple iterations. And we're going to, one of the resources we include here is an iteration tracker that will help you keep track of those different versions, which makes it easier to remix elements later versus kind of starting from scratch each time you're trying to make a change. And it will also help you score those results against the guidelines. So again, and then if you know, there's some additional questions you have there, we can go over that. And then convincing others that a change is needed, right? So one of the most effective things that I've found with that is taking your existing mission statement, if you have one, and running it through the recommendations, getting those scores as how it lines up, and then taking that to leadership. And probably the most effective one is readability, and we'll talk about that more in just a minute. So again, thank you guys very much for taking the time to fill those out. I think we'll be able to tailor things for you. So first and foremost, you know, what is a mission statement? We define it as a one-sentence statement that describes the reason your organization or program exists. It is what you do, and this is a little bit more of a recent addition that we made when we revisited kind of our analysis. It's focusing on who or what you're doing this for. So it's what you do and who you're doing this for, and it's typically at a pretty high level. Now, what's the problem with most mission statements, right? Well, when you're just looking at this, what you do and who you do it for, inevitably you take everything that, you know, you go in a brainstorming session, you write down all the things that you do, you write down all of your different stakeholders, you're going to come up with something that's typically way too long. People are going to see it, their eyes are going to glaze over, and you're going to lose their attention, right? You have a very limited amount of time to capture someone, And a mission statement is a very effective way to do that, whether they're an employee and making sure that they're kind of keep coming back to, is this core to what we do? If they're a website visitor, and the website visitor stand, depending on who you talk to, it's 3 to 6, at most 8 seconds to really determine if they're going to stick around or leave. You give them a paragraph of text with a bunch of jargon, they're gone. You've lost it. So the other challenge is, right, they're not just too long, they're really, really hard to understand. And again, this is a outcome of taking all of these things, trying to compress it into a sentence, stringing together all of these adjectives and word strings, this, and that, or this, and that. And it gets very, very complicated to follow. And again, we're going to go a little bit more into readability later, but when you start dropping mission statements into readability tools like readable.io, it comes back with the number of years of English education required to understand this. And this is at a functional level. The average American has an 8th grade functional reading level. They may have graduated from high school, but their functional reading level is 8th grade. This mission statement, which comes from a large international organization with chapters all over the place, their mission statement comes back as requiring 18 years of English education. That's a functional education level of someone with a master's in English. They're talking over 98% of the population. That's what we want to avoid, right? Because when you do that, it's not useful. And it doesn't have to be an 18 years of education to be not useful. If it's just too clunky or hard to follow or too long, you quickly start degrading the efficacy that it can have, right? It's going to just sit there on your wall somewhere collecting dust, right? It's not going to actually be doing that much for you. It's not going to be driving value on an ongoing basis. So the first time we did this about 3 years ago, we looked at the top 100 organizations. We looked at their mission statements. We kind of dove in and started dissecting elements. We distilled some best practices and we published those results, and they became very popular, right? In the realm of 1 million views in the last 12 months popular. And that's given us a lot of opportunities to interact with people, right? We get a lot of questions around it. And there were 2 main areas that kind of came back as people continuing to have questions and challenges. The first was, well, how do I measure clear? Real quick side note, the fonts got a little bit messed up when we uploaded this. I apologize, but I think it's still readable here, so just bear with it. But again, we talk about a mission statement needing to be clear. Well, clear to you may not be clear to me. So we spent some time looking for tools that can help measure clarity. And then the second area that people were struggling was just that roadmap, right? I know what good looks like now, or at least have a rough idea of what it's supposed to look like. I know where I am right now. It's nowhere close to that. I have no idea how to get from point A to point B. And so that's where, when we revisited it earlier this year, we expanded our analysis. We looked at a whole bunch of additional areas. We focused on kind of pragmatic, what are the building blocks? What are the different elements? How can we break it down and then distill each piece and then start to string those together? And what are some tools that we can point people to measure and grade the mission statement as we go along, right? So this is then housed in this webinar, and we'll be diving into the specifics now. So again, what's in the course? We're going to talk about what is a mission statement, what it's not. We're going to talk about who the 3 audiences are for a mission statement. We are going to talk about how those audiences use the mission statement, and then we're going to go into the updated guidelines and best practices. We're going to talk about building your own, right? We're going to walk you through some of the resources that we've created to walk you onto your mission statement, going into the different building blocks and frameworks, going to selection, brainstorming, and distilling, and then getting into to combining, testing, and iterating. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about here is going to be mission statement focused, But as we kind of go through it, I'll be talking about the ways that the recommendations are consistent with a vision statement and where they're different. So again, I might follow up for those that are interested in more vision statement specific stuff. We can cover that towards the end. Okay. There's going to be some resources that you can access. It should be available to you right now on the sidebar, but we've got some cheat sheets and high-level worksheets for you, both for mission statement and vision statement. We have individual worksheets for each of the 6 building blocks for the mission statement side. And we've got a free iteration tracker. It's an Excel document where you can paste your different versions, indicate the number of words and things like that, and the sheet will automatically score it against those recommendations. Okay. So we talked about what a mission statement is. Let's talk a little bit about the audiences for it and how they're going to use it, right? So we bucket audiences into 3 categories. You have your external audience. Those are your website visitors, potential volunteers, potential donors, potential partners, right? Those that are outside of your organization that are trying to understand what it is that you do and what you're doing or who you're doing it on behalf of. The second group is going to be your team. Those are your employees and volunteers. The purpose there is that your mission statement is going to focus and motivate them, right? So it's giving them a clear guideline as to what their efforts should be working towards, right? And who it is that they're serving. And it just adds meaning to their work, right? And it gives them something tangible to kind of grab onto that's easy to understand, that's easy to internalize. And then lastly, it's key for your leadership, right? So a mission statement should be guiding strategic decisions, right? Whether it's planning a new initiative, determining, what we're going to focus on the next year, what pieces are we going to eliminate to make room for growth in other areas. It's a litmus test that you can run ideas and options through that without you introduce a high probability of what's called mission creep, right? If you haven't clearly defined what it is that you do and who you do it for, some idea comes to the table, some donor comes to the table and they want something, it's really easy to start expanding what you do and who you do it for in a way that waters down your impact and your branding, okay? So again, those are your 3 audiences. There is some overlap between the purposes there, but those are kind of the 3 primary functions of that mission statement. Now, let's talk a little bit about the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement. We've got the mission statement is that one-sentence statement describing the reason your organization or program exists. Again, it's what you do and who you're doing it for. It is active, it is present, and it's got to be short, concise, and hit those 3 functions, right? A vision statement, on the other hand, goes hand in hand with a mission statement, but they are distinctly different. A vision statement is a one-sentence statement describing the clear and inspirational long-term change. It's that outcome, that future state resulting from your work. So again, it's that desired end state or that ultimate outcome. And you're going to often see the same elements. You're going to see, who the audience is and what the benefit they've seen. But again, it's set in the future. It's when your work is kind of done. That's what you're aiming for. It doesn't have to be something that you can realistically realize in a short time frame. Though one option with these is to set a long-term vision statement, but also to set shorter-term ones that have more clear and objectives that you can kind of reach within a stated time frame The downside of doing that is it's kind of awkward when you reach that date and you haven't hit them. So I'm a proponent of the long-term one, and then you can kind of create your initiatives on the shorter-term time frame that will move you in that direction. Okay, let's talk some specific examples. Nature Conservancy, right? Their mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. Right? They're actively conserving lands and waters. That's the what that they're doing, and all life depends on it, right? Now, their vision statement is to leave a sustainable world for future generations. So that's looking out into the future. That is their ultimate objective. The mission statement is driving towards that ultimate objective. Oxfam, it's an international development agency out of the UK. They create lasting solutions to poverty, hunger, and social injustice. Right? This one's a bit interesting. They don't call out who their exact target audience. They can kind of get away with that because they're this large global international development agency, but they are being very specific that they are actively creating lasting solutions. They're not just putting band-aids on things, they're trying to solve things. And that ultimate vision that they're looking for is a just world without poverty. And you can see how their mission is working towards that vision. Lastly, let's look at ASPCA, an animal rights and advocacy organization. They provide effective means for prevention of cruelty to animals throughout the United States. This is specific to the United States chapter. Their vision, again, it pairs nicely that the United States is a humane community in which all animals are treated with respect and kindness. So mission is what they're doing, vision is what they're ultimately aiming for. Okay. I'm going to pause there real quick, just see if there's any comments that have come in. Looks like Kathy's offered her condolences to those working with a large group, right? And that, absolutely right. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. If you have not already started the process, I'll tell you right now, keep your group as small as possible. We'll go into some more specifics there. And Amy, if there's any other questions, just feel free to surface them. I'll keep going, but I'll pause periodically to touch on those because I do welcome questions as we're going. We'll have more time at the end as well to cover any that might have been missed or were held to the end.
Okay, I'll feed you any questions that come up, folks, so feel free to send those in. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. All right, so what are those guidelines? I'm going to start moving a little bit more quickly so we have some more time to start talking about the questions that you have, but it needs to be clear. Your mission statement needs to be easy to understand, right? That's the intent behind clear. It needs to be concise, short and to the point. So real quick, on the clear side, we're talking about readability, and it ties into being concise as well. Longer mission statements become less clear just because there's more involved. So there's that tension there. Concise, you're really looking for 14 words or less, 20 at the most. And then useful, it comes back to if you build something that's clear and concise and cute, but it doesn't inform your audience as to who you do, it doesn't focus your internal teams, and it can't guide your leadership, well, it's not really a mission statement. It's gotta still meet that key functional criteria. So let's go more into clear and concise, right? We touched on this before. In the West, Western countries, you're looking at an average reading level, English reading level, and again, this is the functional reading level between 7th and 9th grade. In the United States, it's 8th. Most mission statements fall somewhere in the college student actively studying English range, right? So by definition, the average means that you're already talking over half of the population of adults. You start moving that number up and you're just losing more and more and more of them. And it's not to say that they can't understand it, but it's that they can't understand it the first time through and fully. And if they're not understanding it the first time through and fully, the chances of them going back through and reading it and taking the time to fully digest it are small and getting smaller every day as people's attention spans go down. So that's why it's really critical, right? So it is really crazy to think that we as organizations are creating mission statements. Some of us even serve people that are underprivileged, that have much lower educational levels than the average American, and yet our mission statement is written in such a way that it's inaccessible to them. So tips here, right? The readability tool, readable.io, there's a link that we provide. You'll see us kind of go into the tool a little bit more. That's a really great way to gauge, and it's something that you can use for website content, messaging around events, all of that. It's a tool that I highly recommend you guys start working into your workflows. But you want to keep things simple. Again, you're not trying to impress people with vocabulary in your mission statement. You're looking for concrete language. You want to steer clear of those vague concepts. You want to avoid buzzwords and jargon, and you want to use shorter words, those that have 4 syllables or less. When we move on to concise, again, we're talking 5 to 14 words, 20 words max. This one's tough, right? You're trying to compress a lot of stuff in, but it's really important, especially when paired with clarity. So you got to keep that drafting team small. Doesn't mean that you can't have more people involved in the process. There needs to be a subset of folks that are focused on creating that draft, because when you involve too many people, everybody wants their ideas included, and it's virtually impossible to come up with a result that stays under 14 words. You want no more than 1 word string. This is a very common pitfall that people fall into. They want to talk about this in service for this, and that group, so that we accomplish this and that. People have a very hard time following all of those word strings. You get one, and you need to use it wisely. You set clear guidelines and expectations so that everybody that comes into that visioning process or the mission statement process understands what we're looking for, and they understand that adding something comes at a cost of needing to trim elsewhere. You can't just add things and bloat this into a monster. It's going to require some tough decisions and cuts, and it's going to require a strong facilitator. And then one of the most helpful things for people is understanding that your mission statement is not your only opportunity to convey what you do. It serves a very specific purpose. It has very specific parameters. Move that supporting detail outside of the mission statement. Here is our mission, and stop. Here's how we do it. We do X, Y, Z, and you can go into some more details there. So again, think of from a website standpoint, you can support it with the different initiatives that you have, different services that you provide, and so on. But that does not have to be part of the mission statement itself. Useful, we've touched on these. You've got 3 audiences, you've got 3 primary functions. It's got to hit that, or it's not a mission statement. It's a catchphrase or something like that. Readable.io, I encourage you to go there. The .io replaces the .com. They have a text tool. You just click on that, and then you paste in any form of text, right? So you can take your existing mission statement, drop it in there. It's going to come back with grade levels. It looks at several different algorithms, provides an average. So in this case, it would be an 8th grade reading level. This middle section you can kind of ignore. There's some interesting information that come with these other forms of readability analysis, but this is the easiest one to use. And then it will serve up the areas where you have problems, right? So sentences with too many syllables, words with too many syllables, anytime that you're using passive voice, if there's too many adverbs involved, and so on. It'll also serve up a letter grade, A, B, C, or D, or E. There's no F, but they do have an E, which kind of serves that purpose, right? moving along, we're going to start diving into the specific building blocks. Amy, are there any questions?
At this point, no questions. No. But feel free to send them through, guys. Thanks. I guess you're just being very.
So this is where it gets fun, guys, right? So that's all helpful. That's all useful. You're going to have PDFs that will you can reference back to those recommendations. I encourage you to do so. I encourage you to share those with the team. But when it comes time to actually building out a mission statement, it starts with the building blocks. So we looked at all of the mission statements out there, and we started by trying to dissect verbs and nouns and stuff like that. We took a step back and looked at more of kind of the intent of the different sections of mission statements specifically, and we came up with these 6. There is a 7th one that I'll talk about shortly. We don't recommend it because we're also kind of putting some tight parameters around length. These are the 6 that we kind of recommend you consider. We do not recommend that you use all of them. In fact, the most common form of mission statement just touches on the first 2. But targeted beneficiaries, that is who it is or what it is that you are doing the work on behalf of, right? So the who might be economically disadvantaged families or whatever it is, right? It could be anything, but it's that who, and it should be targeted. It's not just saying women, it's saying a subset of women that you're focused on. Actions, it's that high-level action verb. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on all of these, so I'm going to move quickly. But you're starting out your mission statement with an action verb to equip, to promote, stuff like that. Your services, this one is optional. It is one that can be an effective way to communicate what it is that you're doing if you can keep it concise. Problems is kind of a way of focusing on what it is that you are solving, right? It could be hunger, it could be inequality, so on and so forth. A cause is the problem reframed. Again, you have to make sure that your reader will understand what a cause is. Some causes are less familiar or can be easily confused with other definitions, but conservation is an example, right? Conservation is solving a series of problems related to the environment, and so you may choose to use a cause. Typically, you're not going to use a cause and problems together, but it is an option. And then lastly, partners. If you have a very unique part of your model that involves partners that would be not true of your competition or your co-opetition, if you're working with people that are other organizations doing something similar, you may want to call that out. Our mission statement includes that because a big part of what we do is focus on learning from the top organizations and leaders, right? So that top organizations and leaders kind of falls in that partner realm. Most mission statements will probably not have partners included in there. So again, those are the big 6. The 7th would be a description about the type of organization you are. Saying you're a business, saying you're a nonprofit, saying you're a faith-based nonprofit. It's a viable option. We just find that when that's typically included, it often pushes the length beyond. So bear that in mind. If you feel it's important, if what you are doing needs to be called out as being specific to the nonprofit sector, or you want to call out that you're a business or a social enterprise, you can create that 7th one as well. Just be aware that you're going to have to make sacrifices elsewhere. So this is one of the sheets that I include. It gives you a series of actual mission statement examples and how those building blocks work. Again, the idea with the building blocks is you identify which ones you want to use. I recommend typically focus on 3 first, 2 to 3. But again, you've got some options, and you can distill those down, but then you can start to move them around, right? It's typically going to start with an action, but you might have an action show up also a little bit later in the mission statement. You might have services show up before beneficiaries, or beneficiaries show up before services. Again, that's the idea. The building block is hone in on that, distill those, and then you can start to move things around and play with the wording. For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of move through these pretty quickly. I'm going to focus less on the expanded definitions and more on the worksheets. So this is pretty small, but what we've done here is we've created a worksheet that helps you brainstorm who it is that you're serving, and then we work you through the process of distilling that down to a couple outputs, right? And the output you put here the first time may not be the output that you ultimately end up with, but it will help you start to hone things down. And we create a section for a super short version, and then for one that's a little bit longer. Targeted beneficiaries is where if you're gonna add a word string or you're gonna get detailed, this is one of the best places to do it, because the more specific you can be about who it is that you are serving, the more effective your mission statement is in communicating what it is that you do. It removes a lot of that ambiguity by saying, this is who we are primarily focusing on. And it helps your employees and leadership stay focused on that. If you get too specific, though, you may find yourself boxed in, and then you're going to have to revisit your mission statement as you grow, and that's completely acceptable. But just kind of bear that in mind. Okay. The actions. Here's a preview of it, but the worksheet that we have in the building blocks specific to actions, we've got the 80 or 100 of these action verbs. This is not an exhaustive list. There are more out there, but it's a really great place to start. Okay? And you can play with those. You're looking for ones that communicate something meaningful. So we use equip in our mission statement because we're creating resources and content that's designed to equip nonprofit staff. So again, that's what we use. Again, there's lots of options there. Okay, services. Again, we include some examples. You can create a list of your services, and then we kind of walk you through step by step to distill that down. If you're going to include services, this is very commonly where the word string is used. You can get creative and find ways to describe your services without a word string, meaning things that are comma delineated or have ands in the middle, this, and that, or this and that. You may want to do that, right? And you're typically going to stay pretty high level. Very powerful in terms of, again, communicating what it is that you do and keeping the organization focused on that. Just know that if you're using the mission statement as you should, if you start wanting to move outside of those services, you're going to have to revisit your mission statement, or you're going to have to make a tough call to walk away from an opportunity or find a partner that can do that so that you can remain focused. So again, very powerful way. It can be limiting, and that can be a good thing, or it can mean that you have to revisit it sooner than you might otherwise do. So provide detail and color, but you may not want to get overly specific. That's one of those areas that if you need help with that one, we can set something up to discuss that specific to your circumstances. Okay, problems. We talked about this a little bit before, but it's just framing things in the problems that you're solving. Your efforts are to solve these problems on behalf of this group. List those down, distill them down, and come up with that output. Cause, very similar. It's just kind of that reframe. It can be a nice way. You just want to be specific. Conservation is typically not good enough. You're going to want to say conservation of the oceans or conservation of national parks. Get specific about the ecosystems or the groups of people or whatever it is that you're doing this cause on behalf of so that it's meaningful. Alone, it's probably too broad.